When I tell you that we are going to be teaching people who are new to grappling how to do a heel hook, does that just send a chill up your spine and make you cringe in terror? Because we're going to be teaching you how to do a heel hook. Today's class is going to be on Irish collar and elbow wrestling. Has anybody here heard of it before they saw my class posted? Okay, I'm not surprised there's not that many hands going up. It's only about half of the class, and that's because collar and elbow is kind of a lost art, right? It's kind of like HEMA in that way. There's a broken lineage where for a significant period of time, there was nobody that practiced it, and a lot of people haven't even heard of it. When I was telling my friends about this class, I have quite a few of them on a Discord server in Ireland who are really big into martial arts. None of them had ever even heard of this. They were completely unaware that they, at one point, had a national wrestling style all of their own. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time. Irish is an insanely difficult language to pronounce properly. So if I have anybody that speaks Irish and watches this video later or is a part of this class and speaks Irish and they hear me pronounce these things, they're going to laugh their ass off at how bad of a job I do. It's just the way it is. I have asked like my Irish friends, please pronounce this for me so I don't get it wrong, and they didn't have a clue. Now, nobody could say when collar and elbow started. Folk wrestling styles usually can't be traced to a single person or a point in time because they just organically develop. But the first time we ever see it mentioned in newspapers is in the 1820s. But when they start talking about it in newspapers, they're talking about it very matter-of-factly, as if the reader should already know what the hell they're talking about. There's no explanation of the rules or what the people can expect when they attend. They act as if like, hey, you've already been watching this every weekend, come see this one, right? And in the 1840s, there's already revisions of the legend of St. Patrick to him going and challenging a grove of druids to explicitly a collar and elbow wrestling match. So in only 20 years, it goes from being mentioned for the first time to like, oh yeah, this has always been a part of our culture, right? Now, every town, parish, and county had a collar and wrestling champion, or collar and elbow wrestling champion. Matches would usually be held every weekend, and whenever a visiting champion came to your town, it was a big to-do. Everybody would be very excited. They'd all want to feed this guy. Everybody would want to challenge him, especially your own local champion. Later, for reasons that we'll get into, collar and elbow spread all over the world, not just Ireland, but obviously Scotland, but it also went to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and most popularly, basically its second bastion, was the United States, specifically New England. Roughly 7 million Irish immigrants traveled to North America in the late 1800s to 1922. Many arrived here starving and penniless to a country that did not want them, and success in the ring was only one of the only avenues they had available to financial and social success. It spread throughout the rest of the U.S. thanks to the Civil War. As a former soldier myself, let me tell you, war is hell for minutes at a time. The rest of the time, you're not really doing anything. So, yes. So what these Irish soldiers would do is they would demonstrate collar and elbow for their fellow soldiers and teach them techniques, and then it spread throughout the U.S. like wildfire thanks to their deployment. Now, it also, for the public, provided an entertaining combat sport that was more, and I'm quoting here, more civilized and less barbaric than the other wildly popular combat sport at the time, which was bare-knuckle boxing. In fact, many newspapers reported, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer in 1897 said, quote, "Ladies can attend this contest with propriety, as it will be purely scientific and perfect order will be maintained." That was not always the case. I'll tell you more about that later if we have time. And the Washington Evening Star in 1889 said, quote, "I would unhesitatingly give preference to collar and elbow as the most scientific and beautiful of all grappling." So, what are the rules of collar and elbow? What made this different from other types of grappling? There were multiple rule sets throughout time and throughout different regions. So what I'm about to lay out here was not the standard, but this did come from a rule set that was attempted to be standardized. there's no time limit, and some of these matches were recorded as having gone up to 3 hours. Now, whether that's a journalist exaggerating, I have no idea, but it's in a paper, so it has to be true. The goal is that you throw your opponent so that they land flat on their back, similar to an ippon in judo, if you have any experience with that. And it was referred to as a laidu, which basically means to lie them down. If your grips on your opponent break in order to save you from a fall, that's a loss. But if your grips break incidentally, like it's just a really intense exchange, nobody's getting thrown, and your hands just happen to come off, that's fine. You just reset. You may or may not have been allowed to go down onto your knees, depending on the region and time. And you also may or may not have been allowed to straight up kick your opponent, depending on the region and time. And also, you may or may not have been allowed to wear boots while you are kicking them. Sometimes even steel-toed work boots, depending on the region and time. In fact, later on in the US, when it started to become standardized, they had to explicitly outlaw the wearing of boots because people would walk away from matches with their legs being described as, and I quote, shins like mincemeat. Just rivers of blood flowing down their legs as they walk off the stage. Not a pretty sight. So, those are historical rules. They're pretty loose, right? We have a modern standardized rule set that was proposed by a guy named Ruhadan McFadden. I'm going to be talking about him a lot later on in this class. He's a cool guy. If anybody knows his contact information, have him reach out to me. I've been trying for months. So the standardized modern rule set that he's proposed is that a standard match is 5 minutes and a championship match is 10 minutes. You win a fall by throwing your opponent so that any part of the body above the knees hits the ground. So you can go down to your knees for some of these throws. You also win by making your opponent break their grip in the purpose of defending a fall, like what we talked about before. A championship match is 5 rounds, and a normal match is 3 rounds. And if your opponent lands flat on their back in the process of any of these throws, it's an instant win, right? The match is over. You walk away the champion. Now, yes, like landing on your shoulder, you lose 1 point. Landing on your back, it's done. So this is what is called a fixed grip wrestling style, right? Like we discussed back hold earlier. There's also belt hold. Collar and elbow gets its grips from the namesake, the collar and elbow. So the way we're going to start our matches is I'm going to grab a hold of Michael's collar. And you see, I'm way up high on the neck, right? If you're down here, you don't have nearly as much control. So I want to get as close to their neck as possible. With my other hand, I'm going to reach not on the elbow itself, because this doesn't have quite as much control. I'm going to reach just behind, right? Michael's going to establish the same grips. And from here, once the judge says go, we can get started with our wrestling. Now, this is an extremely powerful position. The reason being I can control Michael's dominant arm with my left hand to pull them however I want. And I can also control their neck and their head with this grip on the collar, right? I can start pushing here and make Michael go wherever I want. A general rule in grappling is wherever the head goes, the body follows. The position of our legs is going to kind of be based on what we're trying to do, right? But collar and elbow matches were described at one time as being like a fist fight with the feet, right? Really skilled practitioners are just constantly throwing attacks and feints and trips, all kinds of things to try to off-balance their opponent. So footwork is important in the service of a throw. It's not so much like a guard or anything like that. I'm constantly in motion trying to do things. The technique that we're about to cover is what's called the ankle sweep or the ankle trip. In Irish, it was probably pronounced coiléar. And what we're going to be doing here is we're combining the 2 principles that we focused on earlier, right? The first one was off-balancing them. We're breaking their structure, okay? To do that, I'm going to pull Michael towards me, and Michael needs to bring their foot forward in order to regain their balance, right? That's their base. That's what's keeping them cemented to the earth. If I could take away their base at the same time that I break their structure, they're going to hit the ground. So the way I'm going to do this is with the little shin tap that we just worked on. As they come forward, I'm going to try to put my foot to block their shin. Their leg won't be able to come forward. They'll go flying. Now, I will say, I am currently suffering from a slight, minor, devastating knee injury. So I'm not going to be able to do some of these with the intensity and speed that I would like to. Michael's going to be a very kind and compassionate training partner and really sell these techniques for me to make them look really cool. But they're not going to be as picture perfect as I would like them to be. I apologize. Injuries happen. So one more time, I'm going to pull Michael towards me, and I'm going to get my foot in the way of their legs so that they cannot reestablish their posture. That's it. It's that simple to do an ankle sweep. One more time. I'm going to pull Michael towards me by coming offline, and then I'm just going to get my foot in the way. All right. Any questions? Anybody need to see it again? Okay, cool. Now, I'm curious, how many people here have experience in a style of grappling that utilizes submissions, like judo or jujitsu or catch as catch can, anything like that? I'm seeing 3 hands, yeah? Okay. When I tell you that we are going to be teaching people who are new to grappling how to do a heel hook, does that just send a chill up your spine and make you cringe in terror? Because we're going to be teaching you how to do a heel hook. But luckily, a heel hook means something very different in collar and elbow. It does not mean any kind of submission that does any kind of risk of injury to the ACL or the MCL or anything like that. There are no submissions in collar and elbow wrestling, despite what one book from the mid-1900s would lead you to believe. It does not actually exist. So when they say heel hook, what they mean is quite literally, you're hooking them with your heel, right? Pretty simple. So again, yeah. So again, no games for this one. It's very mechanically similar to the last one. The last one we came behind the leg. We're doing the exact same thing, but we're doing it with this leg instead. Okay?
I think this one might be better from the other side. You can push this elbow in.
Yeah, they'll be able to see.
Okay.
So if I try to, actually let me back up a little bit. In order to accomplish this one, I need to get this leg behind Michael's leg, which means I need to come alongside them, right? If I try to do that just like this, Michael is going to frame, like some people were already experiencing the last technique that we worked on. Michael's going to frame and keep me from moving along to the side. This is all they've got to do to prevent me from executing this throw. So I need to do something to deal with this arm first. It's pretty simple to actually deal with, though, if they don't see it coming, right? If they establish that frame already, I'm not going to be able to pull this off. But if they haven't established it yet, then all I have to do is push the elbow into their body. Okay? It's like a scooping motion. From here, I'm going to scoop, and as I do, at the same time, I'm going to step to Michael's side. Now, if we do that, can everybody still see what we're doing? Okay, awesome. So scoop, come to the side, and now I'm going to reach back here with my heel and heel hook and do the same push on the shoulder. Push, instead of pulling on the arm this time, I'm going to push further in, okay? At speed, it's going to look like this. And again, pushing on the top of the body, breaks their structure, sweeping the leg, removes their base. One last time. Scoop, step to the side, get my heel to the back of the knee. You can also theoretically get down here. Again, I find this works better for me. Push and pull. All right. Go ahead, partner up. This technique is called the flying mare. And it is described as, I want to make sure I get the quote correct here, an explosive, high impact throw that would send the victim's feet flying up over his head. It took a while for me to figure out what exactly this would look like based on other martial arts, and I finally figured it out. The basis of this technique, if you've done grappling before, is going to look really, really similar. It's basically a seoinage in judo. But what makes this tricky is we have to do a seoinage without giving up our grips, okay? So how do we do that? What we're going to do is I'm going to need to take my elbow and drive it underneath Michael's far arm. What that's going to look like, it's going to be a little uncomfortable and weird, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to take this elbow, drive it under in a scooping motion, and this is going to allow me to load Michael up on my back. I'm not actually going to do it, but so scoop and step. I like to step far out. Michael likes to step into the body. Kind of depends on your biomechanics. When Michael demonstrates it, they're going to step into the body. Totally fine. It gives you a lot more leverage that way.
I'll show you both examples on Catherine.
Yes. So one more time, taking my elbow, scooping it under Michael's arm as I step in. And notice now my back is on their chest like we talked about earlier. And also their hips are loaded up on my hips. Now Michael will demonstrate the rest of the technique because they are a very good training partner. Now, hold on. I just want to say one last thing. We've spoken with Catherine ahead of time. They're going to full send this just to make it look really cool. And then we're going to show you a safer version of this so you're not going to hurt your training partners. All right, go ahead. And if Michael wanted to be mean, if this was a competitive environment, you could send that even harder. You can literally get their legs like vertical with this technique. All right, go ahead and demonstrate the safer version if you wouldn't mind. Oh, instead of throwing them, you just load them up onto the back and scoop them off the side.
So instead of, so what the full stand, the full yeet is, if I get here and I pop up on the hips and I just go, instead it is on the hips and then just to the side. Makes that much nicer. Feet don't have to go over ass, you know.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I got you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a lot of the stuff like hanging, potentially hanging and having like joints and elbows in there during the knee.
Not as much as you would think, but
yeah,
yes, but not as much as you think.
It is going to feel weird. You might feel like there's some potential for injury, but we've done this many times, and nothing's even really come close to bad happening. And there's nothing like in the historical record saying anything bad happened to the thrower or the throwee from that entanglement. I will say it's going to feel weird. That's okay.
There is like, my wrist is like here, right?
Yeah.
But I've done this against fully resisting opponents in jiu-jitsu, and there's not.
You're not lifting with the wrist, right?
No. The wrist is just bringing them along for the ride.
Yeah. Yep.
It's basically a hip toss. Like it's all in the hips for the most part.
And one other demonstration of this, because like Kyle said, so I like my foot is inside their foot, right? That allows me to get everything here, right? If you want to step across instead, that turns it less into the popping up and over and more into kind of going over my head. Right? Turns it kind of more into a trip than a full throw. Yeah.
All right, does anybody have any more questions on that before we pair off and give it a try? Okay, now I want you doing the nicer version, okay? Just load them up onto your back and let them fall off the side. Don't send them flying, okay? So, we talked about how collar and elbow was an incredibly popular grappling style. So what the hell happened to it and why has nobody heard of it in the modern era? Well, it did eventually fade from popularity, and there wasn't one exact thing that caused it to happen, and it didn't happen everywhere all at once, right? It kind of fell apart and crumbled all throughout the world. Now, Ireland was also not spared from the same issues that affected collar and elbow abroad, which we're going to get into in a minute. But also there was no central structure or organization to promote the style or standardize the rule sets. In the early 1900s, there was an attempt to revive the tailteeing games. This was Ireland's chance to show on the world stage their culture and their heritage and their athletic endeavors and the things that made Ireland really unique. And collar and elbow was completely absent from both attempts to bring back the tailteeing games. There was no one advocating for its return. It was also the Gaelic Athletic Association at one point published a handbook, which the intent was to preserve the rule sets of antiquated or dying Irish sports. Collar and elbow had one sentence to describe what it was in this handbook. And it said, quote, collar and elbow, colon, the same as Cornish wrestling, which is bullshit. It's not even close to the same thing. And it really illustrates the disdain that the Gaelic Athletic Association had for wrestling in general, let alone their own style of collar and elbow. There were several attempts to revive interest in the 1910s, but none of them lasted very long, nor were they attended by many people. There's even one famous match where they went up to try to demonstrate some of the best collar and elbow champions in the region, and the audience met them with boos saying, bring out a catch wrestler. But that's just in Ireland. What about in the rest of the world? Specifically, what about in America? In America, collar and elbow shared a space with catch-as-catch-can wrestling and Greco-Roman wrestling. And this was, at first, a happy coexistence. Collar and elbow was by far the most popular of the three for a period of time, and events would often boast of having all three events that spectators could watch, sometimes even with the same competitors, right? Who's the better wrestler in all the styles? However, over time, catch wrestling and Greco-Roman became more popular as they were considered more realistic and exciting. They spoke more to the common man, the guy that worked in the mines, the guy that got into bar brawls on the weekend, right? He was more interested in seeing the rough and tumble on the ground, dirty stuff. The final nail in the coffin of the trifecta of competing grappling styles was the introduction of judo, which was seen as a foreign, mysterious grappling art that also happened to utilize a jacket, but also had cool submissions and stuff on the ground. In 1967, the Burlington Free Press, a newspaper in Fairfield, Vermont, sent a reporter to the home of the greatest team of collar and elbow wrestlers in the United States in their heyday, Fairfield, to see if anybody still remembered this style that this reporter barely even knew anything about. They managed to find two men, both of them in their 80s at this point. And I have this newspaper article if anybody would like a handout. In their 80s, they still fondly remembered the style of their grandfathers, and they demonstrated for the reporter, at a now greatly reduced speed, the unmistakable trips and throws of the long dead style. In newspaper reporting, this was the last spark of living memory before collar and elbow faded from history altogether. But that's not the end of our story. There is a modern interest in reviving collar and elbow. In late 2020, it was listed as a UNESCO World Heritage martial art and is being revived now thanks in part to the interest of practitioners of other more modern grappling styles. The first tournament in almost a century was held in 2019 at a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Globetrotters event in Heidelberg, Germany, organized by, again, Rodan McFadden, who we're going to go into again in a little bit. He coordinated with the BJJ Globetrotters in order to host this tournament. There were people from, I think it was 9 different countries around the world who participated. And it's not just thanks to his efforts, it is also thanks to HEMA grapplers who are interested in bringing back these antiquated martial arts and antiquated styles of grappling. Jacketless competitions were held in Boston in 2023 and 2024, thanks to the Boston HEMA League. I don't know if Dustin's still here. Hey, Dustin! Thank you for keeping this art alive. Boston EMA League. And not just them, but all of you here in this class today are a part of bringing back collar and elbow from the grave and bringing it into the modern era. And that's my class. What's up?
Hey, Kyle, do we know what the name of the winner of that Globetrotters competition was?
Globetrotters? No.
Okay.
We know
who were the 2 winners of the VHL tournaments? three collar and elbow competitions in the last 100 years. Who won 2 of them? Us.
Just wanted to set some special time aside to again shout out Rodon McFadden. This guy almost single-handedly brought this art back from the dead. You may know him already if you follow any kind of HEMA grappling. He's the guy that made the Hero of 1,000 Holds. It is a podcast and a YouTube channel that talks about different types of folk wrestling all around the world. Unfortunately, both of those projects are now complete. There's no new content, but a repository of the content still exists, and it's a fantastic resource. He also made a website for Collar and Elbow with the explicit purpose of trying to reorganize modern bouts. And unfortunately, it's no longer online, but you can find it using the Wayback Machine. He also literally wrote the book on the topic. And this is a fantastic read that goes into all the history. You can pick this up on Purple Heart. I highly recommend it. I've got a whole list of other sources I use if anybody's curious, but that's all I got. Thank you all for coming.